Oh,
Yay.
two of the most favorite things somebody wants to talk about.
Sure, we can't spot it, but we're at.
And we're live.
Combine the two.
All right, good afternoon. I'd like to call the Finance and Compliance Committee meeting together. This is a committee of the whole. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We are live. And we have John with us. Okay, and Pat and Stacy. So our first up is an athletics budget update.
Try 4-0.
So I will turn it over to Stacy and Pat.
Yes, hello. Great to see all of you in person. I think I'll go ahead and just get started and then let Pat chime in at the end if there's anything that he wants to add. This is just an information item, athletics fiscal review, because some of you recall we said we would bring athletics back at every regular meeting as we worked through the fiscal challenges. And in this report, I'm happy to report that we're still on track for the FY22 budget in athletics. There's no significant changes. Ticket revenue has improved, but we'll give you a more full picture of that at our next regular meeting. And at that meeting, we'll give you the final closure of FY21, not just for athletics financials, but for the university financial statements. We usually do that at the March meeting. So you'll get that full picture of what happened in fiscal year 21 for the university and for athletics, as well as go over our audit. And then we will also have an update on the fiscal year 22 athletics budget, because we will have gotten through the football season and kind of see what the impacts are there. So there's an attachment on your agenda that just has the FY22 budget. It looks about the same. You will recall with the fiscal recovery plan, we did the proceeds from the external financing to get the budget, the FY22 budget updated. And then we have the capital projects lines where we're reporting capital projects expenditures as well as contributions on that bottom line. That information will be updated for the next meeting also as we project to the future years, as well as those athletics capital projects that we just discussed in the last meeting. So hopefully I didn't say, I have to turn around and look at Pat because he's back there, but hopefully I didn't say anything that Pat disagrees with.
No, Stacy, thank you. And you know, just as a side note, fundraising numbers continue to perform well, and we're up in season ticket sales for men's basketball, women's basketball. So we'll have a more formalized update, but we'll have more tangible things to update in our next meeting.
Pat, can you share a little bit about some of the recent unexpected fundraising that's gone on?
It's really fun to watch.
Well, I would say in the last
So irritated that reads
4 weeks, we've been able to secure multiple 7-figure gifts. I think one at $3 million, one at $3.5 million. You know, this is a tribute to, you know, our Washington State alum who we've been talking to, working with as we talk about making philanthropic contributions to impact the university. So yeah, fundraising is up significantly. We've hit a really great stretch here over the last month, specifically since October 19th. So those are all positives, and the hope is as we head into the final month of the year that we'll have some more good news before the end of the calendar year.
Great, thank you. I think that it's probably also important to share that I doubt that those gifts were unrestricted, but they had specific interest in how they wanted the dollars used.
Yeah, we have prioritized 2 specific capital projects. One is a new indoor practice facility. The other is what we're calling a champion center, which really is a building designed for total student athlete development, academic success, mental health support, strength and conditioning, nutrition, all the pieces that are needed for a modern day student athlete to excel, as well as assist us significantly in recruiting and telling a great story about Washington State and our commitment to the total development of student athletes. Right now, we have combined about $40 million in gifts for those 2 projects, and we're still actively fundraising for both. But we believe we're at least at a threshold right now, we can begin to formally work with Stacy and her team to begin a process of moving these two projects forward.
Thank you for all your work. Really appreciate everything that you're doing, Pat. And the two of you bringing back the athletics budget as we'd requested. And there's been some really positive updates. So it's always good to celebrate those as well. Any questions?
No, I just would like to take the opportunity with Pat here on behalf of the Board of Regents to just thank you, Pat. You have demonstrated really outstanding, steadfast, appropriate leadership in the last several months, and we are grateful for that. So thank you.
I appreciate the leadership from the Regents and from President Schultz as well. So thank you. It's a truly a team effort.
Do any of the Regents have any questions or comments that you'd like to make before we move on? Okay. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, next up, we have our Chief Compliance and Risk Officer report. So I'd like to introduce Cheryl, sorry. She is our Washington State University Associate Vice President and Chief Compliance and Risk Officer, responsible for developing the university's coordinated compliance and risk management program. And this is a really important report for us and an important role that has been filled in really focusing very much on our compliance and risk. So really glad to have you here reporting directly to the Board of Regents.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I started this position in the middle of COVID, and I'm supposed to be reporting to you twice a year. And I think, my first year was a lot of COVID and a little bit of compliance and risk, COVID being one big risk. So we've been, I've got a great team, both on the compliance side and on the risk side, and working to build both of those programs while we address emergent issues as they come up. So I've started here. This is just going to go this way for me. There we go. This first slide is really a compliance program is the structure of the compliance program is modeled after the US DOJ sentencing guidelines. They set out, and it's always been kind of a little bit odd thing for me that it's sentencing guidelines that we look to for a higher ed compliance program. And you hope you never have to really know about the sentencing side of that, right? But they do set out some really great structure and guidelines that we can follow that helps create a good compliance program overall for an organization of this size. So the crimson colored circles here are the basic elements of any compliance program that's looking to follow those sentencing guidelines. What I'm going to focus on today is just the top three: the implementation, the training and education, and then the system-wide compliance committee and the position that I'm in, the chief compliance officer. That's not to say that we're not looking at those other circles, but that's where we have initially focused, obviously, as we're in the early implementation stages. And then the other side of my role is risk management for the university and the whole system. And I like to think of this as a circle. You don't always see these together, but organizationally, I feel really lucky that we do have them together because they complement one another so well. I think everything that people have presented on today, most of them, I've probably worked with those teams in one shape or another. That everything we do has a compliance element, has a risk element. And so global health folks I've worked with for years on their compliance and risk, it just by way of example, and it's part of being a university. We do cool stuff. And that cool stuff is all over the world and all over the country. And it creates a lot of risks. And it also creates some unique compliance elements to it. So just kind of going forward and looking at our areas of focus for today. In implementation, we're going to look at the three areas of ethics and health sciences and Clery Act. We'll look at the compliance committee training. We're going to spend a bit of time looking at because it's so critical and it's a high need for us. And then in risk management, I'm going to talk a little bit about something that we've been developing on the operational risk management side. And then finally, enterprise risk management, which I'm just going to get a little peek of what we've been implementing there as we move to developing a new enterprise risk management system. So one thing about compliance, and when you look in the sentencing guidelines, it's not just compliance, it's actually compliance and ethics. So one of the first things we did was we moved ethics advising out of internal audit, which made internal audit very happy because they audit too ethics issues. And the ethics advising moved into our group. We have a great person as our ethics compliance advisor. She had many years in the Attorney General's office at WSU. I feel really lucky to have her and her expertise, Sherry Gordon. And we are building out that and also building out a communication plan for that. We are also working to transition to ethics training, required ethics training. Kind of a surprise that we have not had required ethics training at WSU. So looking forward to implementing that. And it should be ready. We've been putting the web-based training together. It should be ready by the end of the year.
How frequently will they need to take the ethics training?
Well, good question. Right now it's a one required training. Personally, I think that ethics is something that's good to have a reminder of. It's easy to forget, and I think that the ethics laws in this state in particular create high risk for our employees. It's not an institutional risk, it's an employee risk. And so ultimately, I would like to see it to more than once, and probably ideally every 3 to 5 years. It wouldn't necessarily have to be as long as an initial training, but something that just gets ethics out there in front of people in a little bit more required fashion. I mean, we do have a whole communications plan that we're putting together for ethics communication, and internal audit had a good ethics communication plan as well. But yeah, so first things, baby steps, required once, and then we'll move hopefully to something more often.
I mean, over my career has been sort of varied. Some as frequently as at certain managerial levels, it's every year. Just as a reminder, but I'm sure there's some best practices out there that.
Yeah, and there's there's a lot of new initiatives, and as they come forward, they highlight unique ethics issues. So, for example, something that I think we've all been spending a lot of time on is name, image, and likeness. Creates a huge issues in the ethics arena for our employees to help students in that name, image, and likeness, and to help them navigate through name, image, and likeness. In fact, it's something that I'm talking with our congressional delegation with at the state and federal level, because it's so unique. And our ethics laws, I've been a public lawyer in 3 states in the Northwest here, and the Washington ethics laws are by far the most stringent and create the most individual risk for public employees. So we want to be very careful with that and be able to provide people as much opportunity and training as possible. So another area of high need has been the health sciences compliance. This is something that when I came into the position, it was the #1 area where we needed to focus our resources. And first thing we did was hire a great assistant director for health sciences compliance. We managed to implement the really necessary policies. We had to designate healthcare components under HIPAA, which is something that for an organization of our size we hadn't done. And we knew we were tremendously out of compliance under HIPAA. So we've done that. And she has just gone to town creating the whole series of policies then at the system level that need to be created for HIPAA compliance. And also, as you'll see, she just finished rolling out security risk assessments for all of our healthcare units across the system, which also is a requirement under HIPAA that we should have been doing every year for every single health unit, and we're getting that implemented, and already we're already realizing the benefits of doing that. Just in terms of identifying areas of weakness across the system that can be shared and that we all can focus on as a unit, as a system to improve every individual unit. So that's been, I think, rewarding for the team that's working on it, and something that even though the individual units found it a little bit daunting at first, are realizing early benefits, which has been great to see. And if there's any questions along the way, I'm just kind of going through these, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Carol, when you talk about health sciences compliance, are you referring to the College of Medicine, nursing, and pharmacy, or?
And everything in between.
Okay.
And so we have various units that have strong compliance. Maybe like the med school stood up its own compliance unit, and so they're somewhere further along the spectrum than the psychology group that's providing some clinical care at another campus. And then we have Cougar Health Services, and then we have we have various departments that actually are healthcare units because of the activities they do, but they don't have the compliance infrastructure underneath that. So it's a whole spectrum.
Okay.
Yeah. So another central compliance area of responsibility and focus is Clery Act compliance. And the Clery Act is the John Cleary Disclosure of Campus Security Policy and Campus Crime Statistics. This is, I can never remember the full name of the Clery Act, so I actually have to read it.
Oh, easy.
But you know, I mean, it came out of an incident that caused severe danger and harm to a young woman, and it is, the theory behind this act is to allow our campus constituents and people who are looking at campuses, future students, to get a sense of how safe a place is, right? To get a sense of what are the nature of crimes that occur on that campus, how frequent do they occur, how severe are they, and we have to do that for all of our geographical locations. We actually have previously been audited in the Clery Act, and we actually have paid fines under the Clery Act previously. So this is an area of high concern for us as well. Our central office has put a lot of effort into creating consistency across our system. So again, we have strengths in various areas across the system, but not across the system, nor did we have consistent reporting structures and annual security report development processes across the system. That's one of the primary obligations under the Clery Act, is to create this annual security report, which is where these crime statistics are reported. So we are,
Advance the slide to,
there we go.
there you go.
So we are making progress on that. And one thing that we're seeing as we do that, as you're looking at campus crime statistics, you're also thinking about, okay, well, what are the processes we have in place to respond to those events, should they happen? And so we've been able to identify some weaknesses that we have particularly in our smaller geographical areas around the state, where we don't have clear processes in place for emergency response. So we're looking at that as well as they come up. It's part of kind of, as we implement the compliance program, it's a little bit of triage, because when something like that comes up, you know, we're going to turn and we're going to focus on that so that we know that we have an emergency response system in place, and we know who's responsible, particularly where we're sharing locations with other campuses, and we're like, well, we think they do it, and then we call they, and they're like, oh no, it's your responsibility, and then you think, okay, well, if something happened, we would have a lot of this happening. So we're working with various offices to help with that in a couple of locations. And then another area under the Clery Act, and we're just in our Central Compliance Committee creating a subcommittee to look at best practices for violence, substance abuse, and mental health prevention, working closely with student affairs on that, and creating this prevention subcommittee to, again, look at it across the system. I think what we find, and I think it's a common theme as I listen to myself here, we have areas of strength. We're a big system. It's a growing system. Various units have areas of strength, but what we don't have is consistency across the system necessarily. And so we're hoping to improve that as we move forward. So our system compliance committee is a presidential committee. We have about 30 members. We got compliance offices all over. We have athletics, we have research compliance, we have HRS. We have international programs. I think if you look at almost any administrative office around the university, there is a compliance element within that office to some degree. So we are not exclusive. I'm happy to have anybody join. So we're using the committee to do a number of things. One, it's to identify what are our high needs when we go back and look at that DOJ model. What are the high needs that we can identify for system compliance and for individual unit compliance? And so that was one of the initial steps we did. And training, it came across as the highest need, both at the system level and also for people's individual unit compliance. So that's the other reason that's been our other focus. And we're also using the compliance committee as a way of networking across our compliance units and also sharing out information. For example, when we have investigations, whether they be state or federal investigations, and they are confidential up to a certain stage, and then we reach a settlement, there's corrective actions. And I always feel like, yes, it's important for individual units to make those corrective actions, but it's also important for other units to learn from that experience as well. And to be able to take those corrective actions, look at them and see, well, how does that relate to what we do in our compliance unit? What improvements can we make? And so that's also an avenue and a purpose for the University Compliance Committee. And then the next thing we're going to be doing in the next year is actually developing a comprehensive compliance plan. Right now we've got the program that the sentencing guidelines tell us we sort of work underneath that, but it's delving a little bit deeper and looking at a plan that's unique for our whole system. So that's the TBD in the next year. So training, and I've been talking about this a little bit already. Talked about ethics. Also, the other big training need or change that we've made is increasing the required training for sexual harassment and discrimination from every 5 years to every year. And this is a great example of why it is so helpful to have risk and compliance in the same office, because I can look at our risk numbers, I can look at our overall settlement numbers across the institution, and we know where we have high risk, and it is in the area of sexual harassment and discrimination. And so it was very important for the compliance and civil rights group and for myself to increase our training, and we're very happy to have that up. It's a web-based training. It's not onerous. We have there's the initial training, and then there's a very quick training refresher. And I think overall we've actually not had pushback on that from anybody. People have, it's been a pretty high compliance rate already with the training. So that's been a positive. I was happy to see that just from the overall community.
If you've ever, for anybody that's ever worked in the financial sector, you're doing training, mandatory training monthly. That's web-based. It's just like enough to want to poke your eyeballs out. But both, ethics and the sexual harassment and discrimination. I mean, we're being funneled as an executive leadership team. We're taking those twice a year.
Yeah.
And so I think it probably really does warrant a web-based program that is at least annually, just because it's just so important. And there is so much risk based on the size and scope of the enterprise.
Yeah. And that's great to hear.
Yeah, you can come do them with me on Saturday.
Higher education's been very slow on the mandatory training track. So it's, so we are these are the only mandatory trainings for the whole population of WSU. Various units have individual mandatory trainings, but these are it that I'm aware of. I mean, there's some as you come in as a new employee, but so I thank you for that. And it is obviously, I mean, you're hearing me say it, right? I want to increase that. And people just got to remember, and some things you just got to have reminders of. And so that's what we're here for. We're also, one of the things is we have a lot of training resources, but people didn't know where to go to find them. And particularly in the compliance area, some of the individual compliance units have created specific trainings for their areas of focus. So we're just creating a central resource for that. And then continuing to build out our knowledge of our training resources. And I think that one thing we're really learning is that not unlike our former enterprise system, such as it was, our learning management system needs to be updated for this century. And we're working with HRS, and they are very helpful and very much aware of the needs in our learning management system, because it can support in-person training a little bit, it can support some web training, but it can't integrate both of those. And we want to be able to do that. For example, ethics training, it's great to have reminder trainings. It was a web-based, but ethics is also a great area and a great training to do in person, because then you really get those hypotheticals, you get people able to ask questions, and you get those nuances that you just can't get in a web-based training. So,
can I ask a question about that? We just had a meeting where we were talking about consistency of systems and all of that, and you mentioned one thing in your comments that made me go, oh, is this another area where we have a lot of people, so-called rolling their own? So are you, in the training that's going on now, are different departments kind of contracting for their own training instead of doing that at scale across the whole university system?
There's been some of that to a degree. Previously, though, what the ethics training had been was provided on a regular basis, but people could just choose to take it or not. And so it could be, you could ask to have it in person, or there also was a web-based option, but it's been completely optional. I mean, I think for every office I've ever managed, I always require all of my units to take that ethics training, but that basically was up to each individual supervisor. So
it's all the same training that we've contracted for at the system level.
Basically, yeah.
So we're talking about just inconsistency.
Yeah.
So we're not getting the bang for the buck.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the size we are.
Yeah.
There are, the other thing I would say is that I want us to hopefully always be able to do those custom trainings, because, for example, the name, image, and likeness really requires some customized analysis and training. And that's for the protection of our employees, who are being told, on the one hand, help the students, and on the other hand, there's an individual personal ethics risk if you help them too much in the wrong way. So definitely, it's a high priority to be able to do that, both a consistent training across the system and individualized trainings.
If I could, Heather, so much of what we have done over the past at WSU has been almost unchecked organic growth. And so if a unit had a bunch of resources, they did stuff. A unit over here didn't, they didn't do it because there was just so much territorialism and weird budgeting involved that I think as regents, you got to be a little tired of how come the data stuff doesn't seem better coordinated? How come compliance doesn't seem better coordinated? We just, for whatever reason, didn't take the time or have the institutional moxie to say we got to start fixing some of this stuff. So I think this unchecked organic growth, it was nothing nefarious. People were trying to do their jobs, but it also, you would look and probably say you probably spent a bunch of money you didn't need to if it had been more planned. So I think the work here is really helping to think about it in a much more systemic way so that we make those decisions, we execute, and we don't duplicate unnecessarily lots of efforts.
Right, right. And who wants, if you're doing some creative enterprise, you're running a great college, or you're doing research in XYZ area, or you're trying to recruit the best students, whatever your job is, it's other stuff. You should love having that, take it off your plate and having that standardized in a way that makes it easier for you. So this shouldn't be viewed as a hardship. This should be viewed as a great way to delegate tasks that are not central to your mission. So I'm hoping that will be, kind of the consistent message once people get over the change part, which Stacy knows it's always challenging.
A great example of that in the health sciences compliance, our assistant directors created a working group of privacy officers, and they are getting resources and access to training that they just didn't have unless they built it out individually. And the collective sigh of relief across that group has just been enormous.
Yeah.
So
relieves a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, it does.
Relieving workload.
Yeah. Because compliance violations create a lot of anxiety and a lot of problems.
For us too.
So,
why we
right.
Yeah.
I was going to actually ask a follow-up, and Heather teed it up perfectly, but is there any factoring into your training and education relative to Board of Regent training and education?
Well, it's in my mind, but
it's in mine too. So,
but I have not gotten there yet. Okay. So it has been in the back of my mind, and I know Chris Hoyt and I have talked about it to some degree too, and so yes,
seems to be a missing element.
It not for long.
Noted.
It very true, and I think that that's also something that has been more organic and kind of dependent on who's in various offices rather than systematized.
I have a question.
So that, yeah.
John Shetler here, Regent Shetler. I have a question. So with the training and education programs that you have in place, what kind of self-inspection mechanisms do you have also in place to ensure that everything that people are learning, that, if there's, I'm used to a term that we call off the whiteboard, to ensure that people are actually doing what they've been trained and educated on, and that they are following the programs and policies so that we know just how effective we are. So I'm looking at that self-inspection, how do we actually make our success?
Right. And that's part of that circle of or the elements of the sentencing guidelines, a good compliance program. We're not there yet. And I think as I come in, my initial focus is we got to give people the tools to be able to do this. And so we are focusing on the tools, and next we'll be focusing on communication. And once we get through those steps, then I think the next step is the self-assessments and looking at that. We haven't really had enough to assess to. Now, having said that, I know that there are some units, and I'll look at Chris Keene in the research office, because they've put a lot of effort into research compliance, and they actually have a much more robust follow-on assessment program following training. But that is an example of where we have a strength in a unit, but not across the system. So it's another to be developed future Regents update.
Great, thank you.
If I could, part of this is right now we're talking about compliance, but there's also training in diversity, equity, and inclusive excellence and sexual harassment. And what we need is a comprehensive set of things that we expect all of our employees to do. The frequency, HRS really should be very, very engaged in working with us on these things. And then the assessment test may not be just in one particular area. They could be done comprehensively in several areas together. So to me, this goes back to efficiencies. If Charles is trying to do it for this, and then we've got another group trying to do it over here, that's the problem with sometimes the requirements is every group's got a different idea of how many times it'll be required, and it doesn't come across as an overall plan. So I think we just want to incorporate this kind of training with other ones that we need to do on frequency, and that's something we'll be more than happy to talk to the REIT about in the future.
And Workday also has a future capability that we can use, that you can do performance plans for people, and you insert the training that they need to do, and it actually tracks if it's done and all of that. So, woo!
Another great thing Workday can do. Yeah.
Someday.
So now we're going to kind of move out of compliance and into risk management, just sort of leaving you with a few things with compliance. The other area and of focus in building out just my own office, the chief compliance officer, has been creating those connections with the various compliance offices to know that they have a place to report to, right? And to know that I have the ability to report to you. For some of them, we've created official dotted line relationships. So with athletics compliance, I have official dotted line relationship with Cougar Health Services, and with their compliance person who just started. One, we filled that. Thank you very much, Ellen and team. and two, we created a dotted line to me as well. So, just creating that that organizational structure that we hadn't had before. And those are two, and I think that that awareness is increasing as well across the system. So, risk management. This is all kind of evolving, the longer I'm in the office, and the way I've come to think about it mostly is we got the operational risk management side, and then we got the enterprise risk management side. And on the operational risk management side, the areas of focus, one area that's really been developing, and Stacy and I have talked a lot about, is risk assessments and due diligence. Not for everything, because again, there's a risk assessment you could do that for so much in the university that I could do that 100% of my time, easy. But what we look at are those activities that present unique challenges, unique organizational structures, or creation of a new organizational structure, an affiliated entity, or a higher risk. And so some examples where we've started to develop this is, one has been development of a unique commercialization potential from research, from one of our research team members, to looking at, I think, and I know SP3 Northwest that the Regents had heard about earlier, we've been working as a team to look at that and incorporating risk assessment and due diligence into that review and development process as well. So this is evolving, but I think it's something where previously we've had pockets of excellence, but we haven't had a systematic way of looking at this for these larger scale projects. So more to come on that as it evolves. In the real traditional area of risk management, risk mitigation, there's in the insurance market, there's a couple of things I just wanted the Board of Regents to be aware of, because this is a really active space right now, and it's become a very hard insurance market. And some of what's happening may influence many activities. And one of them is that if certain areas of coverage, particularly cyber coverage, we heard this at a national meeting not too long ago, that some universities were having trouble and or unable to get cyber coverage, and that it's not just across higher education, that it's actually across the whole market, and that the claims exceed the resources within the whole cyber insurance market. And we kept mum during that, because we actually got renewed last year at a pretty good rate. We were really happy with that. And then we just received word recently of non-renewal on our cyber coverage, and not for any reason that, or any event that has occurred at WSU. It's actually the broker, our broker, who's the broker for the state, did say that he's seeing this across the board. And the other thing he's saying is that, and thank goodness to our IT team, if we didn't have multi-factor authentication for our systems, we wouldn't be getting it at all. So we'll see. We're going to be going back out to the market for cyber coverage, and we'll keep you updated on that. But obviously, that impacts a lot of what we do in terms of our business activities, a lot of our contractual arrangements, and other activities. So property, we're also non-renewed on our property and our commercial property insurance, and so we're in the market for that. We anticipate being able to procure coverage, pretty likely to be a good increase in our rates there as well. So along with many other institutions of higher education, we are actually looking at creating a captive insurance program. It's something that in our initial analysis, it did not look like it was going to be financially feasible or a financial benefit for us. But I think as the markets harden, we may need to look at it again, and dig a little bit deeper to see how we can provide the coverage that we need as an institution to operate in today's day and age. So we will keep you updated on that as well. I think a lot's going to kind of depend on what happens in the cyber area, and what our options are going to be.
For those areas like cyber and property where we've been non-renewed, how much longer do we have before our current policy expires? I mean, do we have an adequate time to find?
We do, yeah. We actually already have on property. We have a couple of proposals to look at from a couple of different carriers. So it's just an increase of anywhere from 50 to 100% in our premium. In cyber, we have until March. So we did get an extension, and so yeah, we do have time.
It's a scary area. I heard an Association of Governing Boards presentation with some experts in the cyber field, and basically said, everybody get it, because it's not a matter of if you will get hit, it is when you'll get hit.
And it's the ransomware attacks that are creating the demand, and the imbalance in the market. Yeah. It is scary. And then the other side, enterprise risk management. So the previous enterprise risk management exercise was a holistic exercise, but it quickly became static because it was outdated. That's all right. It was a with the resources we had, it was what we could do. And so, you do your survey, you identify all of your enterprise risks, you score them, and then you get your top risk, and then you address those. And in fact, that exercise did make some big changes. I mean, that exercise showed that we needed Workday. It showed that deferred maintenance needed attention. And that process got restructured. So it was an effective exercise, but it was not something that we could readily do every single year. Nor was it something that gave an easy tool to help with assessing enterprise risk and decision making. So with the state, we've been working to implement origami risk software. The state of Washington's DES, Department of Enterprise Services, is one of the initial big licensees on the enterprise risk side of this software. And we're working to get up. Right now, we're working across the whole system to upload our previous risk register and then updating that. And then we'll be going through scoring, and we'll be also overlaying our strategic plan. So I have a couple of little examples here. Stacy allowed finance and administration to be our guinea pig unit. So we did some real initial preliminary scoring and looked at that across our strategic plan goals and objectives as well. And that's what we have after this. But it ultimately, and we will do a much more in-depth presentation at some point here so that you can actually see the enterprise risks once they're all in there. So you can see how they divide across the units, how they divide across our strategic plan, and any other filters that we think is helpful for this board to look at in terms of your roles.
I have
So,
a question on that. Some organizations that I've been involved with, when they do enterprise risk management at the higher levels, do it as a joint between the leadership team and the board. Do you have the board included, other than presentation, in any of your plans for ERM?
We haven't actually gotten that far. I would be actually really happy to. And I think let's take that back. We'll talk about it and see how best to use your time and involve you in that. We're at such the preliminary level right now of uploading the risks and then revising them as needed. But I think that would be great. Yeah, I welcome that. So, so as I said, we went through and we exported these again because it's just not quite ready in the risk management tool to go in and do this live right now. So, but this will just show you, across finance and administration, it has the highest number of enterprise risks anyway across the system. And so here's a thread on the ratings on all of their risks. And then these next few slides just sort of show you, with respect to each of the strategic plan goals, where the finance and administration's risks, sort of how the overlay with those on those goals. And then what we would be able to do in the software is drill down in each one of these areas of the pie, look at what those risks are, and then look at, what's being done to address those risks, what's the gap analysis, who's in charge of that, what have they done in the past year. All of this we'll be able to look at once we have the software fully operationalized.
What do you think the timing on, let's say, bringing this back and being able to drill down with the board?
I think that probably the summer to really make it a good use of your time. I have January 2022 in here, I think is what I just saw but that's just getting everything initially loaded and then starting the scoring exercise. And I think, Stacy can share with you that when we went through the initial scoring exercise, we realized that we needed to revise the risks. And so we are all learning this as we go. And I don't want to use your time unwisely in that regard. So
It might be a good retreat.
Yeah, I think so. But I want to be a little bit wiser about it before we do that.
Really what we found is we had, little teeny risks or really specific items versus kind of the larger risks. And we just need to be able to get that in a better order, I think, in order to make this the most effective.
One thing I really like about this software is that it identifies not just an executive risk owner for each risk, but the operational owner, so that there is some real ownership and follow-up there for each of the risks that we identify. And it also allows us to categorize them so that we can create what's called in the software terminology a parent risk and a child risk, so that we can get those smaller issues that we realize shouldn't be a primary enterprise risk, but that they do relate to other enterprise risks. And then we can drill down within individual administrative units. And then actually, once we do this, I want to be able to do it at a college level too, so that, because each college is an enterprise unto itself. We're one system enterprise, and then each campus is an enterprise unto itself. So ultimately, I would like for this to be a tool that decision makers at all of those levels can use in their strategic planning. I think that's pretty much it.
You had the one quote.
Oh, I did. I had a quote right at the end. I just found it. Yeah. I think as we go, as we evolve and as we evolve into a system, we are breaking new ground everywhere we go. And I don't want risk management to be something that says, oh, you can't do that. That's not the purpose of this. It's actually, how do we do it smarter? So that we don't have to come back and undo it, because that is very painful, very time consuming, and very costly. So.
And also, is it worth it?
Right.
Because is the gain so great? It was a risk to convert to Workday, right? Mm-hmm. But it was a bigger risk not to.
Yes.
And so, you looked at it from the right perspective there. One question I had for you, are you looking at climate risk at all? I'm
not internal climate, but in terms of
climate change.
No, that's not on the list. That's a very good question, though. I think that that's another thing that definitely we'll take away and give some thought to, because the other thing that listening this morning to the equity discussion, and that is a risk, but it is also a risk that overlays every single risk. And I was sitting there just thinking, well, how are we going to get that into this enterprise risk analysis? Because that would be it's a tool that will help with that also. So, yeah. So always something more to think about. Yes.
So we've had a couple questions, but I do want to open it up before we transition into future action items. Other questions, comments? Thank you.
Great.
Very comprehensive.
Thank you.
And very helpful.
It's a mile wide and an inch deep, I feel.
John, did you have any questions or any comments before we transition?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much. And that was an excellent question that Heather asked about climate. Very timely. Thank you.
Yeah, he's very great.
Okay, we are going to transition into future action items. And Stacy and Olivia on the WSU Vancouver Life Sciences Building. Hopefully everyone's very familiar with that project by now.
Are you raising money for that?
Yes, well, you saw that, you saw the beautiful plans, you've seen the site, and already we would like to ask for permission to increase the budget. And that is because we've set aside we have a $10 million fundraising goal as a top priority to add the greenhouse and some specialized equipment for a vivarium, labs, nursing, classroom equipment. However, in the short term, if we can increase that budget by this amount, the $2.7 million of funding that we do have set aside, that will enable us to move forward on getting the work done in order to do that. But in addition, meanwhile, we're working very hard. It sounds like making lots of good progress on raising the 10 million. So we will be back as that money gets raised to increase that project budget even further. But this action is just to make sure we can do those activities and still keep the fundraising activities going.
Any questions?
And so that will be acted on at our next meeting. Wasn't sure it was January or March, but probably January. Okay.
Was that soon enough, Stacy? I just want to make sure.
I think
Okay.
it is. Yes. The next, should I move on? Or
sorry,
should-
yes.
No, I want to make sure. The next future action item is a proposed change to delegation of authority for parking rates and fines that we're bringing forward for a couple of reasons. That delegation has not been changed in 15 years. And at the time, it was established as the delegated authority was to approve parking rates and fines that would not exceed the U.S. Department of Labor CPI index and annual increases in hourly rates that would not exceed 5 cents per hour per year. And I think it's time that we raise that delegation. It's just one of those things that we want a little more authority because those are the revenues that we use. It's a self-sustaining enterprise to do our capital projects, to do our improvements. And this delegation is just a little bit low for that purpose. But it does still keep kind of the guidelines in place so that if it were to go above that amount, we would still bring it back to the regents for authority. So for this future action item, as we've looked at the past, we've just think that it's time to request that increase. And if you look at toward the bottom of that agenda item, it does say it's increased up to an average of 10% across parking permit types. And then the other rates are designated there for daily permit rates, hourly rates. So this isn't an open checkbook by any means. We also still have all of our committees and task groups that review all of this information at the three, well, I guess now 4 campuses that have parking rates. So it's just a bit of requesting a bit of an increase in delegated authority.
When you look at other campuses, for example, I mean, having run downtown Spokane, like parking is the single biggest challenge that they think they have. So are you looking at are you aligned with what the rates are with in this case, like an urban center versus so that the person that's parking in downtown is coming across over into WSU's campus, there isn't some disparity that is kind of ridiculous, or are you looking at that? And
yeah, we do.
You guys.
Pardon me. We do look at that. We also, I know in the past when we've brought parking increases, we've looked at other campuses, since we have multiple campuses,
right?
You know, one is in, 2 of them are in more urban areas, and so those comparatives with either a nearby downtown center or other urban campuses. And then we also pay attention to the amount of rate increases that other campuses are doing and how that fits in. Really what drives this is, as a self-supporting entity, in order to do maintenance and safety projects, we just have to be able to fund those. Mm-hmm. So we really want to keep it aligned with what is a reasonable amount to pay based on the local market and all of that. But how do we make sure that we're building up enough to just get those projects done?
Yeah, Regent Wright.
I'm curious how this will impact different campuses differently. And so I'm thinking about the Vancouver campus, for example, where our bus system is not as accessible as, say, the Pullman campus, or where in Pullman you might have students who are living in the residence halls and might not have vehicles with them or be paying for that annual parking permit. And so have you given any thought to like how this might impact different campuses in those ways and the student demographics on those campuses and access?
I would say yes, we have, because we still have the same processes. So whenever we want to propose an increase, that we meet with the student groups and on the different campuses to say, here's our case for wanting this increase, and that they have that input. But you are right, it's different at each campus, accessibility to buses and other transportation. But we don't want to change that part of the process. We're just saying that maybe at this point, it doesn't need to be brought to the regents level for some of these increases.
But still brought through the committee structure.
Still brought through the committee structure. So the difference is the authority would be delegated to the president up to those limits that we've described here. So it's just kind of every 15 years, we might consider, moving those delegated authority limits.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, we're gonna head into the action items, and the next action item is something that we heard at the last meeting. And I just want to preface this with, we'd like to move it to consent agenda versus a full kind of open action item. So as we go through this presentation, just keep in mind that that's kind of the process that I'm hoping this committee will feel comfortable with. So Stacy.
Yes, and this, as was indicated, you have seen before, and it really is to keep our revision to our WAC chapter in accordance, in alignment with the law, and it's to add the words "and fireworks" into the code of conduct, the prohibited conduct on the campus code. And it's that's actually an attachment, so you can see exactly where the insertion is there, and it's just a measure to further improve safety.
Thank you for that clarity.
Yeah, thank you.
Really needed to know if where we got the word fireworks.
Highly controversial to me, the consent agenda.
Okay,
I don't know.
Yeah.
fantastic. Check.
Yeah, check.
All right. Next up.
I've got it.
Oh, sorry.
So this does not affect the football games?
Oh.
Fireworks?
Mhm.
When they have a goal and
That's right. I do not know. I need to ask how.
Laura scores one for the team. Wow, she knows her stuff.
We'll definitely check into that, but this is possession of, and we do ours under an official program.
Yeah, with a
I'll
permit,
definitely-
I would imagine.
It even says that further paragraph. If you've obtained prior written approval from the university, chief of police, et cetera, I think it would be.
Yeah.
Shane.
Thank you. for
Yeah, as
reading it.
long as students aren't bringing sparklers in and that type of thing. Good question.
Yeah, I feel like I need a call.
Great. Okay. Anything else before I keep moving on? Okay.
Talking, I can
You're
take my
talking.
mask off.
So,
Still talking.
so the next up is the 2022 state supplemental operating budget request, and I'm excited about this next item, and to have Colleen here with Stacy. So take it away.
Yes, and we're bringing this to you now, even though we have submitted the budget request in September. Colleen and I are committed to working on some type of a timing process. It's really difficult right now because if we followed the Regents' schedule, we would be bringing this in May, and that is well before we've had a chance to really sort through all of the issues. And so this was submitted in September, so we're bringing it back for you to consider. Obviously, if there's something in here you don't like, there's a process for amending that, but we'll work on the timelines so that they're better aligned in the future. But it's a pretty exciting request. And Colleen, do you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, well, go ahead. So let me just identify that for OFM, we submit in biennial years in October, and then we submit in supplemental years in September. And so what has happened previously is that when we bring the decision packages to you in May, that they're often just a framework of what we might propose, because most of the work that happens in terms of the work we do with our stakeholders, with our communities around our campuses, happens from that period between May up until the submittal deadline. And so that's something that Stacy and I are working on. And it's a good reason, because this year's legislative agenda, which is about the decision packages, really supports why we want to be in alignment with that calendar timeline. So let me start by just saying, this is the legislative agenda. You don't have it yet in your packages because we finalized it this week. We only ever finalize it sometime between when the election finishes, or when we get the elections in November, and then when we have Thanksgiving. And so we presented it to Cabinet on Monday, had some feedback, and so this is the final legislative agenda. We'll make sure that you all have copies of it for your use, and then all of the chancellors and advisory councils have it, as well as many, many, many other people. Ooh, I touched something. So our first legislative ask is a compensation ask, and this is one of those asks that for sure we would not have known about in May. So I think if we were about a year ago, we were talking about budget cuts and we were talking about potential impacts from the legislature, and we had walked into the last legislative session in a defensive posture, and that's not where we ended up. And then what happened over the course of this calendar year is the state revenues have increased significantly. We would not normally, we WSU as a state agency would not normally ask for compensation in a supplemental year. We would only ask for compensation in the biennial budget year, for lots of different reasons that I won't go into for the interest of time, but if you ask me, I'll answer them. But what we understood because of the increase in the state revenues is that some of the state contracts were going to ask to be reopened, and that the governor was amenable to that. So we signaled to OFM that we as a sector would like to do that as well. And so as a sector, we are asking for compensation increases. One of the things that will have happened in the past and that you will remember is that we will have compensation authorized but not fully funded by the legislature, or it will be funded based on tuition revenue, which is not revenue that the legislature provides. So we are asking for a fully funded revenue increase in a supplemental year.
Colleen,
So
when you say sector, are you referring to higher ed across the state is collectively doing this, not just
Yeah.
WSU independently?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Correct. And Kirk can talk about that. He works very closely with the other four-year presidents, but it is a sector-wide ask. So our ask for Washington State University is $9.365 million. The language that we use to OFM is we have asked for a merit increase. So but that gives us the flexibility internally so that we can allocate pay increases for a whole variety of reasons, for equity reasons, for merit, for a variety of reasons, but it gives us the discretion to use those dollars as we need to do them. So this is without question the largest ask we have done on its own in a supplemental year, and it is our number one priority. Let me get through them and I'll take questions at the end. I'm going to go in clockwise order. So the next one is the rural public health. So we talked a lot over the past 12 months about COVID. I'm pretty excited about this one because this one is an ask that is directly in response to what we learned during the pandemic. Vice President DeWald and I have worked very closely on this with Dean Lead. So what we identified in the course of the pandemic for rural, remote, and underserved communities is we need a better menu of options, right? So we need all public health practitioners. So that's much, far beyond doctors to be able to practice at the top of their license. And pharmacists in particular play a really unique role in communities. They are first-line healthcare responders. They are the first to be aware of mental and behavioral health issues. They give immunizations. They give COVID tests. And so Dean Lead, with his counterpart at the University of Washington, they conceived of a residency program where we would be able to provide educational opportunities for pharmacists so that they are trained for the unique circumstances in rural communities. So this would be novel. It would be the state of Washington making a commitment to underserved communities with respect to public health, which we've all learned a lot about over the past 12 years, and it would be part of WSU meeting our mission around community-based healthcare. So the next one is also an ask that we would not have been prepared to talk about in May. This one is a governor request, and this is a very big deal. We're very excited to have a governor request. The last governor request we had was the Soil Health Initiative. So Governor Inslee calls this the next pandemic, cybersecurity issues. Cheryl Kamerzel just talked about that with respect to risk analysis. So the governor reached out to us and said, what can we do to put together a cybersecurity program? So I want to make sure to give a lot of credit to Craig Parks, Chris Mulick, and Alex Peach, who did a lot of work working with industry, working with public entities, and then working to look at the lay of the land for higher education in the state of Washington, but also nationally, see what degrees are out there and what do we need in the state, in our state. So we are asking for 2 different degrees for 2 different colleges. So Boylan College and the Carson College at 3 different campuses. So it will be Everett, Tri-Cities, and the Pullman campuses. And so fully funded, that would be $4.448 million to support this. I'm really excited. Glinda Becker-Fenter, who's our AVP for federal engagement, she had been working with Boylan on a cybersecurity ask, which we landed. So this allows us to build on, some work that we had done federally and to start building an area of expertise around cybersecurity. Another thing I want to note is that Chancellor Haynes is here. The last time that we had an ask on our legislative agenda that was dedicated to the Tri-Cities for operating was 2014. That was not a degree ask. That was to support aviation biofuels. but that was the last time. That was a long time ago. So we are very, very excited to have an opportunity to engage that campus and to engage this community. So the last thing I want to say with respect to this ask is, I think we've all talked over the years, and I think Kirk wants us to talk about it again in January. We have been successful because we do an engagement style of government relations. Lobbying is one of the tools that we use in our toolkit, but we use a whole lot of other tools, and third-party validators are probably among our most significant. And so with respect to cybersecurity, we've been working with Amazon. In fact, they didn't even need a meeting. They said they support it, and they reached out to the governor's office already. Amazon, Microsoft, Deloitte, AWB associations, then I would say, AWB, WIDA, local governments and local government associations. We'll be working with Charles Camerzel to connect with insurance agencies who are very interested in this. And then I'm on the board of the WTIA, and they're going to be, as is Heather Redmond, and we're going to be supporting it. The thing about WTIA, it's interesting, is they represent a whole collection of the smaller technology industries like DoorDash, and which has been very interesting to see how vocal they are. So we have their support as well, and PNNL. We have a briefing with PNNL set up in a couple of weeks.
Colleen, you might consider just thinking about even a financial sector representative, because they are so far ahead on and all of this, just because of the nature of things like DoorDash and Venmo and all of these pieces. And so you might just think about that.
Yeah, I will. That is a great idea, and we will follow up with you specifically on that.
Yeah, call Jack Heath.
We'll specifically do that. I will say it was really interesting when we started talking to industry about the degrees that they needed. They wanted engineering degrees, they wanted business degrees, they wanted pure maths degrees. Yeah. They wanted, Murrow has invested in a faculty member, and they said yes, that they need people in communications who are aware of it. So it was very interesting for me to understand how comprehensive this issue is, and it truly is the next pandemic. So this comprises our legislative agenda. We do have one more ask. So we are the fiscal agent for a university center at Everett. So we have made a request on behalf of Western, which is an issue with respect to kind of correcting a financial backlog for them. And we are working with Chancellor Petrie so that maybe perhaps they will be making their own asks going forward. But that is much more of a housekeeping ask, and it's not something that we would put on the legislative agenda. The only other thing I would say is there are lots of times that we submit decision packages that don't make it onto the legislative agenda. Those are kind of two different things, but this year we have good alignment. I think probably the last thing is this is without question the largest supplemental ask we have ever made. And a lot of times supplemental budget is more defense or just steering the car. And I will say this to me already feels very similar to a biennial budget year, and we will have a full throttle engagement in Olympia this year without question.
Do you suspect, considering the state has a $6 billion revenue bump since April, do you suspect that there will be just a bow wave? So we're going to be one of the many coming to the...
I think it will be an unbelievably aggressive legislative session this year without question, especially too because, we will have a new governor after, the Inslee's session. So we're going to start to see a lot of changes in the legislature and in the governor's office, but I think this is going to be a very aggressive session. I know that there's a strong appetite to invest in higher ed enrollments specifically. And so we are talking about how with Saeed Gioba and Chris and with our chancellors, how we can be participating in that conversation so that to the extent the legislature makes an investment in enrollments, we are shaping what that looks like because they also want to increase enrollments the same way we would like to increase enrollments.
Kurt, can you speak to just the temperature of what you're feeling around the salary increase component?
Chris and I have probably done 10, 12 visits so far. We've got a bunch more scheduled for the next couple of weeks. Nobody's surprised by it. Let me put it that way. They all expect it. And I think our proposal is probably generally in line with what they would think. I think if we came at 5% or something, they would look and say, you guys are just way out of line. So far it's been good. And I think your point and Colleen's is exactly, every member says, yeah, there's a lot of money on the table, but they said they're going to be 7 ideas for every dollar. And it'll be really important to just continue for us to be aggressive in this. And the good news is We are in line with the other 5 publics who are also doing the same thing. And that can be a very coordinated, powerful message when all of the public higher ed is talking about this as our primary need. So that doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I do think we've got a great set of relationships and it makes a big difference.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
We have over the maybe the past 3 biennial, we have really worked to kind of standardize. The legislature really understands that WSU, we are the research land grant. I say that because we have a tribal college, so we have a tribal grant in the state of Washington, but we are the research land grant, and so they really view us through engineering or technology, and then health sciences, and then agriculture. And so we've been working every year to kind of standardize that whatever we bring forward, we put it under those categories. And so I'm very excited because we did that for 2 out of the 3 this year. So yes. Dean Butler really worked with us on the language for data and technology at the boundary. It allows us to capture cybersecurity. It allows us to capture data analytics, which has been a legislative project. It allows us to capture aviation biofuels. But data and technology at the edge, that is something we are very good at WSU. It is an area of academic excellence. And then public health, which is an aspect of health sciences, but it allows us that flexibility to meet the legislature and the governor where they are at with WSU's academic priorities.
So this is a really ignorant question, but on the 9.365,
yep.
What percentage, well, 2 questions. One is what percentage is that? Because you said if we'd come in at 5, so okay, 3%. And then very, very good. This is adapting to the masked reality. Hand signals. And then, so we get that and we figure out how to allocate that, which I'm assuming is partly union type stuff that we have to deal with, but then do we need to get it again, or is this a one-time bump? Or
no, this will go into our operating budget.
We'll lock it.
Yes, this will. What's the acronym? The PBL. This will permit.
Well, but
budget line.
Heather, I think so. It's key for us to come up with a way to pay our faculty and staff more. They deserve it. They worked really hard, all those kind of things. I like to, as I visit on campus, and we did our town halls, and I'll talk about this tomorrow in my report, this should not be seen as the piece, but this is a piece of what we might be able to put together. We still have to determine, we've asked the legislature, this is very important, to fully fund this, not fund it assuming a percentage tuition increase or something like that. So let's just say we're successful with this. The board will have to decide what we want to do with tuition and fees. It depends on where our enrollment comes in next year, this spring and fall. My point is we may be able to put some other resources together that would also be used for compensation, in addition to this. And so people can get excited now about how you're going to distribute it, what percentage is going to go where, and we really just have to be patient a little bit, see where things kind of play out, and then see what we can put together, because we have some equity issues. We know we have some gender equity issues that we've identified with faculty and staff, and those are things that we've got some money actually set aside to help address some of those things. It's not included in there, and so we'll be ready to come back to the board and say, here's what we think we can do. Here's the package. Here's what it's going to address. And I think that's going to be an important part of moving forward. But no president wants to, all of us want to go out there and tell everybody, here's what we're going to do. And it's just still a little fluid. We got to see where we're going to come down.
And you, as a team, obviously, and with us backing you up and consulting with you, that almost $10 million, that's not sort of like subject to a formula that's already predetermined because of past arrangements or deals or anything. I mean, this goes back into Stacy's land of.
Yes.
Budget that we can put wherever we want to, as long as it's for people.
This actually goes to the timeline question that we talked about. So we were not aware, simply because of activity with respect to the state budget and the various entities that would be engaged in this type of an ask. We were not even aware that compensation would be feasible for a supplemental budget. I mean, Stacy and Teresa and I had an exchange where we said it is not possible in a supplemental. And then the landscape has just changed, so frequently and so dramatically over the course of the past year. So when we became aware that this would be available to us in a supplemental budget session, then Chris Mullen with Kelly Westhoff, who's the executive budget director, working with Teresa starts gathering a lot of information and putting together a formula. And so the decision packages are available on the budget website, and they really go into a lot of specifics, and we can make sure that I'm sure you have those.
No, but the key thing, and you said this earlier, Colleen, was we use the term merit because that gives flexibility and means it's not a prescriptive type of thing, and it gives us flexibility to do what we need to in terms of how we elect to allocate the dollars. So
that is an excellent point. If
That's
we say
what I
equity,
wanted to hear.
if we say equity to OFM, then what OFM hears and what is required under probably state rule is that then we give the exact same pay increase to
Correct.
everybody, and we don't have internal flexibility. So we use the term merit in our request to OFM, and that allows us to make the decision.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
there you go. See?
Yes.
And am I masking? Thumbs up.
Other questions, comments? John,
you.
go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll see you in January.
I just want to pause and just say it's really hard being on the other side when everyone else is in the room. John, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I am good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you for
Thank you.
support.
We've got
Regents
8
Butler.
minutes.
Colleen, this is really important stuff and exciting. And I think in terms of our priorities, we've heard from our faculty, this is such a great need that I'm hopeful you'll be able to bring this home.
Well, and I guess just what I would say to that is if you need us, if any of us need to weigh in to help advocate, then be sure to ping us for that.
Every one of you.
It's going to be, it's not going to be an easy session.
No, we really
The healthcare people are coming in because they got to pick up, the state has to subsidize now the institutions that have been providing healthcare that didn't have the revenues come in, but the numbers of people needing healthcare remain constant and the cost went up. So it's going to be a fascinating session. I think higher ed I think higher ed's in really good shape. So I'm not going to alarm you, but there isn't like a lot of money sitting around because already the people are lobbying governor saying this is how much money we need here and here. So it's going to be, but we have the best team going in there. So I just believe that we'll get most of what we need.
We're going to get all
You go.
Thank you.
The other element that I think is important about what Colleen shared was also that third-party validation and the engagement efforts that are happening. And so I think that's equally as critical as the leadership and direction that we're seeing from her office. So this is exciting. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. Stacy, was there anything else on this item that you wanted to cover?
No, I think that was it.
Okay, I think that wraps up our committee.
Nice job.
Yeah.
Getting
A
on
little early.
This was a light agenda for you, Stacey.
I know. Just like vacation.
Right? Do this with your eyes closed. No, thank you very much. Okay. At this time, the Regents will be moving into executive session to discuss with legal counsel litigation or potential litigation in which the university is or could be a party. This session will be closed. The executive session will conclude at approximately 5 o'clock, unless it's extended by further announcement. If any action is taken as a result of these discussions, it will be taken tomorrow during open session. Immediately following the executive session, this meeting will adjourn. So for us, why don't we gather back here in like 5 minutes, take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll.
Job. Thank you. It's going to get a little.
Our effort, with us just now having purchased Grand Coulee Credit Union, now we're Republic, Othello.
We're going to get all the money from the to help.
All the money.
All the money.
That
we're sure going to call you.
Yeah.